podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people.
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Smartest People Podcast. I'm Chris Stemp.
And I'm John Rojas.
Thanks for tuning in. I feel like it's been a while since we've done something, but it hasn't, has it?
It's been a while. I think the last episode we released was last Saturday.
I don't know. We're keeping up pretty good, though. So thanks for coming back, checking in. We've tried to write a little better on the website and everything, smartpeoplepodcast.com. Check out the posts and what we put up there. It's pretty good. This week is awesome. I think it can benefit everybody if you're young, old, whatever. We're talking about the internet and with it, the best of the internet.
Oh, I love the internet.
You do. You're a big fan. And
yes.
The coolest part is I think this week's guest does what you do for me, which is takes the things that matter on the internet and kind of points them out so I don't have to search all the bullshit.
So you're saying you should pay me?
Well, I don't pay him anything, so.
Well, somebody pays him. So somebody should pay me to do this.
Hey, man. Well, if you go to our Amazon widget at the top of the page.
I guess technically everybody can
right?
pay.
You can pay us. Make sure you use that, by the way. This week we talked to David-Michel Davies, also known as DMD, which I thought was awesome, and that's what we referred to him as. He's the executive director of what we know as the Webby Awards, which is the best of the internet. He's devoted his life basically to finding these gems in the internet or now mobile apps and a bunch of things and not exploiting them, making them known, basically bringing to you what matters and kind of keeping the junk to the side, I would guess. Right, Roach?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this guy is essentially my role model / hero. I mean, he sits at his desk. Well, I'm sure he's got people that actually do it for him now, but he scours the internet to find interesting and helpful things and then sends them out to his quote-unquote friends.
Well, and we asked him that, like, what do you do on a daily basis? And he still tries to keep kind of grounded and do some legwork. We're kind of making this seem like he's just a guy who looks at the internet, but dude's super smart. He knows, like, everything that's going on out there. The awards, I mean, it's the main awards on what's awesome on the internet. They have big shows. I mean, these are awards ceremonies that, like, stars, and, I mean, they knew the Google guys before a lot of people were really onto it. They knew all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, for the Webby Awards, there's a panel of judges and stuff like that. So he sits and talks to, on a daily basis usually, the guys that created Twitter, ICANN Has Cheeseburger, Chat Roulette, Ira Glass, Zach Galifianakis, all these people that are interested in internet culture and that kind of stuff. They sit there and discuss what's hot, what's nice out there, what's cool, that kind of stuff. It's awesome.
And like you said, internet culture. I think that's the biggest part we talked to him in the interview about just the culture behind it, how it's changed everything forever, probably, until the next big thing, which we can't even get into. So, and he's really smart when it comes to it. I mean, just extremely knowledgeable.
He's shared that knowledge on various platforms. I mean, he's been on CNN, Fox News, Good Morning America. He's spoken in front of different companies like Interbrand, Microsoft, Institute for the Future. So, I mean, he's a well-versed guy. He goes out there and, spreads his thing. It's awesome.
And then he also, what's that thing that I got you to sign up for that he does and he sends out the daily?
Oh, the newsletter Netted.
Netted. Netted.
Netted.
That's kind of hard to say, but seriously, it's phenomenal because you don't have time to find out what's good on the internet, and he'll send you every day what's good, like what's great.
What's helpful. He'll send you apps, websites. So, when Mint.com was becoming pretty big, like they recommended that to people. There's all kinds of apps and stuff that just help you throughout your daily lives and all that kind of good stuff.
Actually, one of the things that I think is really awesome about it is the internet is full of crap. It's full of terrible stuff.
False.
We were just talking about ICANN Has Cheeseburger. This dude's worth millions of dollars. No.
You had no idea what that was.
That's awful. And I'm glad. I never want to know what that is.
I actually was doing some research on that site, and I think the way that the CEO and creator of that site put it is perfect. He just wants to make people happy for 5 minutes of a day.
That site makes me pissed off for 1 minute of my life. It just does, because
that's crazy.
Some people, 170 million people go to this thing to look at pictures of cats. Like
A month. Yeah.
Sorry, we're getting off track here, but so anyways, what DMD does and what the Webby Awards do is they point out the things that really matter, really going to help you in your life, and in one way or another. They might be funny or just good things in internet culture. So I'll turn it over to him in a second, but as I mentioned, make sure to use our Amazon link. It's kind of keeping us going, keeping the lights on. Thanks for following us or liking us on Facebook.
We hit 1,000.
Boom. Cue the clapping and laugh track or whatever. Whoa. So everybody, thanks for that. That's really awesome. Thanks for following us there and on Twitter and all that good stuff. So without further ado, learn a little bit more about the internet and internet culture with David-Michel Davies. Again, thanks for being on the show. I have to admit that, and I wanted to start off with this, you alone are the reason that I have a personal Twitter handle. After I heard you speak at Living Social, I was like, oh my gosh, I finally understand it. Because John has been trying to get me on Twitter for 2 years, and I refused until you came and talked. So that's my thing right there.
Your Twitter father.
Yeah, you are, because I didn't understand it. I mean, the links you made were just they were outside of my grasp.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. It's funny, I was like very early to a lot of things, but I can't say that I wasn't late, but I can't say I was early to Twitter. Like I was like probably like the 30th user or something like that on Flickr, and I was by no means that. Twitter was one of the ones that I definitely was not one of the first users on of the few. So, I think it's one of those things that's super valuable, but, maybe like a little bit like a bike, it takes a little bit of time to learn how to use it right.
Yeah, well, I know John he lives on it, so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I guess we wanted to kind of just start off and talk to you a little bit. I mean, dive right into the Webbies. It's one of the coolest things out there, and I know that it needs to be heard and seen by more people because it really highlights the best of the web. So could you kind of tell us a little bit about it for those that don't know, and also tell us how you started it?
Yeah, sure. So the Webby Awards is actually in its 16th year, which this will be the 16th annual. I still feel weird saying. I think I've been working on it for 13 years. So I think part of it is that when you work on something for so long, the sort of lines between you and what you're working on blur a little bit. And, I know better than anybody how long 16 years is on the web. And so sometimes when I say that, it makes me feel old. And I sort of realize that maybe I am old. But even though the Webby Awards is sort of old for an internet company, we like to think of it as really cutting edge and really paying attention to like what the very, very best stuff is on the web. So like I said, it started 16 years ago. Back then we were honoring just websites. That was sort of that was the main thing that people did on the internet, with the exception of maybe like email and instant message. We had, today it's gone from, back then it was websites, and today, of course, we still honor websites. We also look at online film and video. We started that about 5 years ago. That's videos that are created for the internet specifically, so not shows that were on TV and then put up online, but literally shows of all sorts, news shows, politics shows, dramas, comedy, of course, that was made specifically for the internet. We also look at interactive advertising. That's all the different types of advertising campaigns that you see on the internet these days. And then, of course, more recently, but very, very dominant these days, mobile and apps. I think we started honoring mobile and apps about 4 years ago. And in the last few years, entries have essentially doubled each year. So it's really growing. It's probably the fastest growing part of the web that I've seen in these 13 years doing this.
What type of growth have you guys seen in terms of, how people look at these awards as one of the most prestigious things that you can get in terms of the internet now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a couple like easy facts they can really quickly show you the growth. I think in 2005, we had 2004, 2005, we had probably about 2,000 entries. This year we get more than 10,000. So that's a lot of, growth just in the amount of work that's entered each year. We get entries from 60 countries now. I think probably 5 years ago, we probably got entries from like 15 or 20 countries. So it's become more global, and the amount of work being entered has grown. But I think, I think we've always, I at least, and I think we've always really believed that the internet and the web was a mainstream thing, even when it wasn't mainstream. And that was part of why we were so passionate about it and why we love it and why we love celebrating it. Because at the end of the day, it's actually a place for everyday people to do everyday things. And, now that's like not a weird thing to say. You have entire regimes in the Middle East being transformed by social media. You have, the business of entertainment in California being totally transformed by the internet. I could go on every single industry. So, at the end of the day now, the internet is really sort of like the global force of change in the world, or the sort of most important, or at least the fastest growing force of change. So it's a really obvious thing, but, I think for a long time it wasn't, and it was perceived as this like weird computer thing where like these physicists and, art dorks and computer people hung out. Fortunately, that's changed now, and that's why we really love it. And I think that's part of why it seems like it's more mainstream. But really, we've always been trying to honor, the work and the sites, and whether it's apps or websites or whatever it is that, regular people love and use all the time and feel connected to.
Right, and that actually leads perfectly into another question that I had, and you kind of got into it here. I wanted to ask what effect you think the internet will have on TV, movies, and music, not in the sense of like distribution and stuff like that, because we've already seen that with MP3s and digital files, but just because the cost to entry to put these things out there is next to nothing now. I mean, anybody can record at their house, whether it be music, movies, TV shows, that kind of stuff. What effect do you think that that's going to have on these older business models of TV, music, and movies in Hollywood?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. So the competitive thing there is, whether it was a TV channel or a movie studio or even like a publisher of books or whatever, part of the value that they provided was in scouting and finding things that were good and choosing to make shows and publish them, finance them essentially, right? And I think, and that was expensive. Like it was expensive to make a TV show, and it still is, but it's gotten a lot less expensive because of all the things that you mentioned. And so now that hurdle of the price and the cost that used to be financed by some of these sort of like, industries has gone way down. And so it's a lot easier, obviously, for people to, anybody to, write a blog post or make a song or whatever it might be. So there's more stuff, right? And so that means that there's more stuff that needs to be filtered, but it doesn't mean that the job of filtering isn't still important. It just means who's doing the filtering is changing, I think, ultimately. So I think there's actually still a huge role for a programming executive at NBC and for a publisher and for some sort of a record label to choose and curate what's really good. But there's a competition now against, they're competing now against curators on the internet and crowdsourcing and all the other different types of ways that, really good content can sort of find an audience, essentially, right? And so I think that's that's a core thing. It's not that that role is not important anymore. It's just that a lot more people can participate in that role of the curating and so forth, and the cost of it has gone down a lot. But I think it does open up a lot of other questions or a lot of other challenges. It's not as if just because now anybody can do it that consumers are going to have 100 times better content than they ever did. There's still, that just creates sort of like a cascade of other new challenges that need to be solved or addressed.
Now, seeing how the Webbies is all about finding the best of the web, do you think that good websites, good apps, things like that, things that are productive or worthwhile or whatever it might be, do they eventually find their way to the top? Do they eventually get found by users? Or is the internet just so crowded, in your opinion, that sometimes really strong things go by the wayside?
It's a tough question. It's an interesting question. I think that I think that stuff that's very, very good and very unique and that has a team behind it that has a certain type of behavior finds its way, right? But not everybody in the world who makes really good work is necessarily a great person for promotion or for marketing, or sometimes it's not very social. And so a lot of times it isn't just enough to make something that's really great if you don't have or can't lean on somebody who can help get it out there, So I think that I don't think it's sort of a given. I do think it is most important thing, right? That like something that's really good has a much better shot of making it in the world than something that's mediocre.
Right.
On the other hand, I think that there's a lot of stuff that's sort of middle of the road that does find an audience because the people who are promoting it and getting it out there and talking about it are really good at that. And I think that that's actually an important skill. And so I think it's obviously a mix. But if I was going to say which would you rather have, obviously I'd rather have the great content or the great work. I think part of what we see as our job at the Webby Awards, though, is to provide actually like a really even playing field for shining a spotlight on great work, right? Like anybody can enter. There's a fee for entering, but it's actually, given the scope of the world and that kind of thing and how much it costs to actually build all these things and everything, it's pretty minimal, right? So certainly if you do something really good and you're really excited about it, it shouldn't be the thing that prevents you from participating. So anybody can enter, and then everything is judged at exactly the same level by the same amount of people. Doesn't matter who you knew or who you were able to send a press release to or anything. It all goes through the system, in a sort of unbiased, fair way. And ultimately we work with like PricewaterhouseCoopers on making sure that we count everything properly. And so I think it's a really fair way and an easy way for people to participate and have a shot at, if it's really, really good, being recognized. And, we have all sorts of stories of people whose, whatever it is, personal site, blog, all sorts of things that have gone on to become like huge success after being nominated or winning Webbies.
Right, and I can imagine. I mean, it's a huge platform. Now, I know you can't give away all your secrets of the Webby Awards, but what kind of things do you guys look for in a winner or in a strong website?
Yeah, we have a set of criteria, which obviously anybody can look at. And, it's actually a pretty good guide, I think, for generally like how to make good interactive work. And they vary based on the type of work. But so like, let's look at, if you wanted to say, take a look at apps, right? We look at content. Obviously, that's very important. We look at the design, the visual design. We also look at how the apps are organized. We look at how well they work. It's interesting is that when we first started out, there was all these things that were actually really, really pretty, and none of them worked, right? Today, there's so many tools and so many development tools out there. There's still a lot of issues, but like things work really, really well, at least comparatively to the past. And then we also look at like interactivity. How well does it take advantage of the fact that it's the internet, it's a two-way medium, and there can be a back and forth and that kind of thing. And then finally, there's sort of we call it like a overall experience, which is like an X factor, which really depends on the category. And by way of example, if you're trying to run like a really great news app, the most important thing is content, right? Like you could have the most beautiful, best organized, most functional app, but if your news is like 3 days late, or if it's like not sort of as it's happening, nobody wants to go there essentially. So in those kind of categories, content's really important. In other categories where it might be like more experiential, like in fashion, where they're trying to convey a mood or a feeling about a fashion brand or about a look in the world, visual design might be really important. So that's sort of like the X factor. But I think that's actually for anybody who's making work online, those 5 or 6 criteria are sort of the things to focus on.
I want to continue this conversation on apps because we've definitely become more of an app culture. And you were just at South by Southwest, correct?
Yes.
I think it was you that had said that the apps are the new scripts, comparing it to Hollywood. Yeah. Can you explain what you meant a little bit about that? And
Well, actually, I should say, I tried to say that, but who told me that? Bob Greenberg, who's like the founder of RGA, told me that one day, and I've tweeted about that and quoted him before. It's such a great analogy. But the basic idea, it's just really funny. It's like if you go to Los Angeles, everybody you meet is somehow involved in film. Like the waiter is trying to give you a script, and the real estate agent is an art director on a film, and everybody's a director. It's just like, that's like what everybody's trying to do, and everybody's constantly sort of trying to get people to read their scripts and that kind of thing. And it's sort of like their side project that they hope will one day like help them make it big. And we're just, in New York, and I guess also in Austin at the time, there is this similar feeling where like anybody can make an app, and everybody's trying to make an app and have the app be like their thing and trying to get their app out there and promote their app and that kind of thing. So it's just like a sort of a funny analogy, but I think it does depict, like, sort of in a really poignant way what's happening, especially here in New York, around app development and how much energy and enthusiasm there is for it, both from companies but also just from individuals.
Oh, definitely. And can you give us one or two apps that you saw at South by that you are, I guess, most excited about seeing actually come out and released to the public?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's see. The one I think I talked about, one I really liked, which I thought was interesting, was called Pose. And Pose is sort of like a social network for fashion. It's like a social app for fashion. So it's relatively simple. It's like people taking pictures of clothing and so forth and following people who share similar tastes and that kind of thing. But what I really like about it is it sort of touches on something that I think is changing or important, which is, everybody is on Facebook. There's, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of people on there. And to some extent, it really makes sense if you're going to have like a group or a community or a page or whatever, obviously, to be there because that's where everybody is. But with so many people there, I think it makes, it does create like a market for some more niche audiences who want to, sort of share and talk and all that kind of stuff, but not necessarily in the entire public square, if you will. If you want to use like sort of Facebook as like the main public square, now there's room. It's so big that there's room for like some side streets, right? And I sort of see Pose as like one of those kind of side streets that, the fashion community can kind of go down and really focus on. And it's not going to ever be like a substitute for Facebook, but it could be a complement.
To talk about this, I guess, side street concept, the internet is so large and, there's so much information out there. And now we've been moving towards this app society where we're more or less making these small niches or compartments that we're interested in. Do you see any type of issue with that approach of becoming an app society where we'll have certain apps for each interest that we have and then pay attention to nothing else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two parts of that, which is sort of like the cultural implication and then the tech part. But I mean, I've always, I don't know how long it's going to last, but to me, apps are essentially like a transition period, right? And I don't see the way we use apps and on mobile phones sort of lasting for forever or for too long. I think ultimately what happened is the hardware got really good for the web or for mobile more quickly than the software sort of developed in order to react and sort of deliver great content or great experiences to it. And specifically, the iPhone came out. The web itself just wasn't really ready at all for something that was that fast and that good and that clear and all that. And smartly and as a way to sort of handle that and give people a great user experience, apps, which can be downloaded in small packets, they can provide sort of a more localized experience for people, were developed by Apple, and lots of people, started creating them, and it's great. It's a great marketplace, and I'm not political about it. Like I'm gonna keep using apps until there's something better.
Right.
But I think that ultimately, the sort of segregation, or what you want to call it, the siloing of one experience from the other is not really what the web is about, and is not really why is sort of, and the opposite of why the web was so successful and it scaled, right? And that's because everything is connected, right? And when everything is connected, there's a lot of advantages there. And I think ultimately that's why the web got so big so quickly. And so as I think, in these few years that come, as, everybody talks about HTML5 and all these technologies that are going to make, regular web better for the mobile experience, as they get better and faster and all that kind of stuff, I sort of think we'll just transition back away from apps back to like the web again on our mobile phones. But it's not going to happen immediately because people build up a lot of investment in apps, and that means from both the consumer downloading them and using them, and also companies creating them. So it'll probably, I think it'll fade over time. But that, that's my thinking. Who knows what'll really happen? But that's sort of how I always looked at it as sort of a transition period.
That's interesting because I was kind of going to go down that road. I guess with apps, we just covered it, so we can talk about more the internet and technology in general. What do you see being the step? Do you see, do you have any really strong insight as to what we're moving towards? I mean, you're the designated internet smart person, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask you that and ask you to predict the future.
Well, one thing we here at the Webbies, we always like try and focus every year on a few things that we think are really interesting and that we're seeing a lot of work being done on, and where we think that work is actually changing the way regular people behave. And we really focus a lot on how do regular people behave. And so one that we really are interested in is the way mobile technology is affecting like cash, buying things between people at stores, the entire sort of function of commerce, right? And we're just like, that's like a very, very old behavior. You go in to a store, you go to a stall in a market, you go, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you go to travel great lengths and you trade. That's sort of like, exchange, barter, commerce is, one of the, core things that we've done as human beings forever. And for a very long time, we've been using cash in order to do that. And, I'd say like in the last, whatever it is, 10, 20 years, as people have been using credit cards, and that's been easier. That's obviously been changing. But now we're seeing all these really interesting ways that your phone is impacting this consumer experience, whether it's how you exchange money with each other, how you buy things at Starbucks, how you buy things at the Apple Store, how you buy things at your corner coffee shop. And I think that's really interesting. And we've sort of looked at a bunch of examples of, there's obviously a bunch of apps I could sort of talk about if you wanted to, but I think that's a huge change and something that we're seeing accelerating a lot this year.
Now, I also wanted to ask you, do you spend the majority of your time specifically, just because you are the founder of the Webby Awards?
I'm not sorry, just to interrupt you. I want to be clear. I'm not the founder. I started at the Webby Awards 13 years ago. I was like a kid out of college in 1998 or something. I made websites when I was in college for extra money, like for beer money, and after college. And I moved out to San Francisco thinking I was going to get a job as a writer, hoping I would. And I got out there and all there was like web jobs everywhere. And one of my friends actually worked at the agency at the time, this old school classic internet agency called Vivid Studios that did all the work for the Webbies. And I ended up starting at the Webbies helping run the judging process. Okay. And I did that for a few years, and I worked for the two women who were the founders. And then I went off and did my own thing for a few years. And in 2005, I think it was, the Webbies was sold to a different company. And I met the founders of the new company and really hit it off with them. And they sort of asked me to come back to New York and to run the Webby division. So that's sort of how I got into it. I'm definitely like the longest, I've been with the Webbies sort of longer than anyone. And it's definitely sort of like I adopted it a little bit as my own, but I can't claim to be the founder.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected. Longest standing member. But, do you concentrate on, because a lot of the things we do on the podcast is we talk to entrepreneurs, we talk to people about their passions and where they're going. It kind of started as a career advice type thing. Do you spend the majority of your time seeing how the Webby Awards can expand, where you can go, or do you kind of like to stay ground floor and really be diving into websites, apps, like individual things, searching the end of the internet, things like that?
Let's see. I guess, I think that in order to do to sort of see where you're going, you sort of need to be paying attention to where you are, right? And I certainly, like I said, we get about 10,000 entries. We have an academy of judges of 1,000 people who live in like 30 countries who go through them all. And so we choose those choosers, and we really try and focus on making sure that people who are picking them are really good. We obviously, everybody who works here because they're passionate about the web. And so like our culture of the office of what we do here is a passion for internet culture. Like that's like why we're here. But, I think you have to blend paying attention, at least from my perspective for my role, it's like you have to blend like being really passionate about like what's out now and, what's coming and all that kind of thing. But then also thinking about that as it relates to our actual business. And I think we've done that. We're definitely interested in, like, to go back to what I said at the beginning, we think the internet's a really mainstream thing, and we're very much interested in like how we can grow to continue to be, in a mainstream way, to talk to a mainstream audience. And so a few things we've done, like in the past, a few years, I think 2 years, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we launched a newsletter called Netted, which is sort of like a little bit of a daily candy or a Thrillist, but for internet things, apps, sites that make regular people's lives better. So just very, very consumer focused. It's one site or one app a day. that we send out. And it's, we've grown it very, I think we're well over 100,000 subscribers, and expect as we get into sort of our busy season for that to grow a lot. And so I think that was an interesting thing for us and something we really love doing. And it helps us sort of continue to talk about the internet to that broader audience and hopefully serve like a very good mission, which is educating, curating, and sort of giving them, excellent content every day. And then a while ago, actually, about 5 years ago, we started something here in New York City called Internet Week, which is a public-private partnership between our company and the city of New York, where we put on a whole festival that celebrates the internet. We had about 300 events happening citywide last year. And again, very much our mission: curate, celebrate, educate, about internet and internet culture. We do that here in the city, and then a few years ago, we actually launched it in London as well. So. Anyway, to answer your question, I think it's definitely like a mix of passionate about what you're doing now and knowledgeable about it, but also paying attention to what else is going on so that you can continue to, to sort of grow and hopefully, meet that passion or grow into that passion.
I need to find more guys like you because I do kind of the same thing where I'll find different YouTube videos out there or sites and that kind of stuff and send them to my friends, and everybody just makes fun of me for being an quote-unquote internet dork.
Oh, yeah. We definitely do. And I'm glad you brought up Netted, actually, because that is awesome. Like, I recommend everybody check that out. I'm not a huge internet guy, but I feel like that keeps me up to speed.
Thank you.
And then one last thing I actually had for you, again, this kind of goes back to just you being an expert on the internet and all those things, is me and John often joke that we get more done in a day than our parents got done in a week because of technology and connectivity and things like that. Do you feel like we work harder still as a nation? Like, to me, technology is supposed to make things easier, but now it's like do it faster and do it more. It's just multiplied. I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, I guess I would say if you look at the nation's productivity, it's been going up for decades and decades, right? So we're getting more and more productive, and we're working the same amount of hours, essentially, if not more. It's all relative, though. It's like I always say, it's like, when we were kids, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I wanted to go see Star Wars or something, and the show was at 8:10, my parents were like, "We better leave the house at 6:30 so we can get there at 7 and stand in line for an hour to get the tickets to wait for 20 minutes to see the 2-hour movie," right? Yeah. And the kids these days, they would, nobody does. They just would never do that, right? They go to Fandango, they pre-order their tickets, and then they. That sounds ridiculous to them.
Yeah.
So in that way, that sounds like way more efficient. But then, they have other things in their life that in 20 years that they'll consider when they look back to be like us standing in line for a movie for 2 hours, an hour, or whatever. So, I think it's just probably it's relative to what you know and sort of where you came from. I do think it's interesting I'm assuming of similar generations though, but I do think it's interesting being sort of part of a generation that lived before the internet and after the internet, where there's a sort of unique perspective on what the world was like before email or before anybody really used email. And I don't think that, moving forward, I don't think that people will have that same perspective, because I think the sort of change that happened is, like a once in 500 year change. It's not like a kind of change that happens every 20 years.
Yeah, it's like, who uses maps anymore? That gets me the most. I can't even believe how did you know where to go before MapQuest and before GPS? I have no idea.
AAA, we used to go down, I remember on high school road trips, we used to go to AAA and tell them we were going, and they would print out this trip ticket that was on a dot matrix printer, and at the time, it seemed so cool.
That's the best.
And now,
Nothing will be better than this.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, I know you're busy, and thank you so much for being on. The Webby Awards are incredible. We look forward to them. Netted is something that we'll put a link up to that on our website, because I recommend it to anyone, young, old, internet savvy or not. So, again, thank you so much. It's been a really good conversation.
Cool. Thanks for having me, you guys. Like I said, the podcast looks like it's going really well, and I applaud you, and I'm psyched to keep checking it out.
All right. Much appreciated.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And welcome back from that awesome interview with DMD. Chris, thoughts?
I mean, I loved it. As you know, we talked about this in the intro. I don't like scouring the internet. So if anybody can make it easier and really point out the good stuff, I'm all for it. You know, you have a massive hole in your shorts right on the crotch.
Yeah, for some reason, and you know what? There's actually a bigger one in the back, but
I'm sorry.
the stitching, luckily it's double stitched here, so you can't see anything, but the front stitching, I don't know, man.
Anyway, sorry, it threw me off, everybody. It throws me off my game when there's a gaping hole. Anyways. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Really hope that, sign up for Netted. Check out the Webby Awards. Submit some if you know of some really awesome things. Smart People Podcast, cough. I actually wanted to ask him, like, hey.
That's a great idea.
Right?
Let's get 1,000 of you to
a million.
Send, well, once we get to that listenership and fan following on Facebook.
Yeah.
We can get everybody to send our podcast as a nomination for the smartest podcast. Maybe.
It'll be a new category.
We'll make up a
It'll be a new category. Thanks for following us again on Facebook. We're trying to get to 2,000 now. So help us out. Spread the news to your friends. We get some awesome feedback from you guys, by the way. Thanks so much for writing in, sending emails, just letting us know what you think. You've been talking it over with your friends, or like these things bring up conversations, all that good stuff. That's what we're here for. Kind of spark some conversation and help you learn something along the way. SmartPeoplePodcast.com is the website. Check it out. And that's all I got for you.
Yeah, and keep sending those emails. Don't get discouraged if we don't get back to you. We got a lot of stuff going on. We get a bunch of emails. We try to get back to as many as possible. But
I feel like we get back to them.
Yeah, for the most part. But there's a couple that slip through the crack, and I don't want them to stop emailing us.
We read them. I promise you
we
that.
Definitely
Every
read
single
them.
one.
Yeah, we appreciate them.
We take it in. So thanks again. Tune in next week. Another great episode.